Hey everybody, welcome to another Follow-Up Friday video. This week we will be following up on the previous Sunday message about the spiritual habit or practice of solitude and silence. To begin, what I want to do is continue to make the case to you that our culture has a disease of more problem. That's a phrase, hopefully, that rings a bell for you now. We've talked about it for 2 weeks. But I want to dig a little deeper into that and then show you that, like Sabbath keeping and fasting from the week before, silence and solitude are our spiritual cure to that problem. So first, let's talk a little bit about the basic neurology of the problem that all of us face in modern 21st century American culture. This is from an article written by Shannon Terrell. The title of that article is The Toxic Reality of Overstimulation. The key word in that title that I want to focus on is overstimulation. So let me read just a few paragraphs for you, and it will delve into why this is such a detriment to our emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Quote, simply put, overstimulation is physiological, psychological overload. It is an active overburdening of our senses, affecting us both physically and mentally in tandem. When we're overstimulated, we're feeding the body and brain more information than it can actively process. Overstimulation can come in a variety of forms too. And it also has a psychological component, like when we're overburdened with work and spend too many hours in front of a screen. When you take a look at the neuroscientific evidence of sensory overload, you begin to realize that overstimulation isn't just a problem for our modern society. No, it's a disease. And here's why. Our world, in the wake of the digital revolution, has become so integrated with digital technology that overstimulation has become our norm. And this is bad news, because this constant overburdening of the senses isn't healthy for us. Beside the strain that we put on our senses, we're also unwittingly allowing ourselves to become overstimulation addicts. Overstimulation creates excess dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter tied to the reward and pleasure centers of our brain. The problem with so much excess dopamine is that as time goes on, our dopamine receptors become less responsive to the natural ebb and flow of our hormones. This means that we require greater and more powerful stimuli to release the dopamine we've come to crave. See how the addiction factor kicks in. The more we have, the more we need. It's an endless, vicious cycle that throws our entire bodily systems out of whack. So did you catch the connection? We live in an overstimulated culture, and this is in large part due to the very recent development of all these digital technologies. They're recent insofar as they've really only occurred in the last 100 years of human evolution. And so we are overburdened by all the stimuli that we are taking in all the time from our computers, our phones, etc. And moreover, there is a physiological, neurological issue with all this overstimulation in our brains, which is that it produces more and more dopamine, And in so doing, makes it harder and harder for us to enjoy or find happiness, because the more excess dopamine in our system, the more that we have to start to begin to feel or to continue to feel positive. So all that consuming that you and I do of information, of screen time, all of it is contributing to our basic unhappiness and heightened stress level simply at a neurochemical level in our brain. Here's a writer on contemporary culture. He's a pastor. His name is Peter Stinky. He's a Lutheran, and he's written some of the most definitive works on how a lot of these cultural issues of overstimulation and busyness play out in church. And this is a quote from his most recent book. He writes, "No cohort of people have had to live with such velocity and reach of change as those who are currently living." That sounds like the busyness with which you and I have to live on a daily basis. Things change so much more rapidly in the 21st century than even the early 20th century. So as a result, the World Health Organization did a study of 14 developed countries, trying to measure the anxiety levels of each country. Of the 14 countries measured, Americans rated the most anxious people group, coming in worse than countries like Lebanon, Nigeria, and the Ukraine. There's a naturalist, a biologist by the name of E.O. Wilson, who really sums up this dilemma of modern digital culture really well in this one sentence. He writes, "We've created a Star Wars civilization with Stone Age emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." So in all that, what I hope you begin to see is how all of us have begun to live lives that are fundamentally unhealthy for us. And that you didn't really get to choose it. This is based on the culture in which you live and your basic biology and brain chemistry. And so, now you can understand why spiritual disciplines of disengagement or subtraction are ever so important for folks like us. They've always been important in church history and for the practitioners of Christian spirituality, but they are doubly or triply important for us because of the age we live in. There's a great metaphor that a writer named William Sims draws about the effect of silence and solitude upon us. This is how he puts it. Solitude and silence bear the same relation to the mind that sleep does to the body. It affords it the necessary opportunities for repose and recovery. Does that help you perhaps catch a great image of the effect of solitude and silence in your life? That it should feel like a good sleep. That you're tired at the end of the day, you fall into your bed, and you fall asleep really quickly, and you wake up the next morning refreshed and ready to face what's next. Or maybe it's like a good afternoon nap on an off day. You're tired, you're worn out from the week, and so you crash on the couch for an hour or two. And after you've lounged there and you've dozed in and out of sleep, you arise and you feel so much more rested, so much more yourself. Yeah, that's how solitude and silence should feel in our lives. They're recuperative. They heal us. They restore us from the deluge in which we live. In this email that contains the link to this Follow-Up Friday video, there are a couple of articles on the spiritual disciplines of solitude and silence that you can read if you like. If you want to learn a little bit more about these disciplines, see how they might be practiced creatively or in different ways. Then there's a third link that talks about mindfulness. A few months ago, in early 2020, my wife did a seminar at one of our Disciples Together nights on mindfulness, and it's a really neat corollary, or runs parallel to solitude and silence. Mindfulness is a kind of spiritual and, yes, Christian meditation that pulls you out from all your anxieties and stimuli and pulls you back into your own body. So during your practice or experimentation with solitude and silence, mindfulness meditation, just like breathing prayer and centering prayer that we talked about on Sunday, would be a good thing to use. So if that interests you, click on that third link, see what mindfulness meditation is all about, and perhaps put it into play in your own practice of these spiritual disciplines. I want to end today with something from Dr. Kim West. She is a Christian therapist, and this is from an article that she wrote about the need to simplify or unclutter our lives. The reason this fits with what we've done the last couple of weeks is now we know how you do that. You do that through these spiritual habits or routines of disengagement or subtraction. And I hope you hear in this article motivation to chart a different course, to become the person you always wanted to be, but you felt like our culture and our way of life in this country would not let you be that. May Kim West's words guide you forward and become your own words. This is what she writes. Do you wish to live simply, quietly, peacefully? Me too. To live a simple life is to live from an uncluttered heart. If we were to step back for a moment and ask our heart what was truly important to it, what might it tell you? Would it say that it just wants more stuff? Or might it tell you that it wants to fill every waking hour with busyness, toil, or work? Would it really want to live the way you're living right now? If not, then what does your heart really want? Mine wants to slow down and smell the roses. It wants to delight in the moments of everyday life and its relationships. It wants to get my life down to the essentials. It wants a life in which the presence of God is real, not merely an idea. It wants to return to a simplicity that I and my culture have overcomplicated. The moments, minutes, hours, and days you experience are your life. It's not coming someday, it's here now. You are making your life with every breath you take, every experience you ignore, and every choice to be present. You may be able to plan for the future, but you never actually live in it. You only live one today at a time. Don't give up dreaming and thinking of what could be, but also never mistake what might be for what actually is. What kind of life does your heart and my heart long for? It's probably not the way that we too easily live. Distracted, anxious, overstimulated. There is a route forward to something far better. A kind of life that your heart would think is a home. And the route forward to that is in part these spiritual disciplines of disengagement and subtraction that we've talked about the last 2 weeks. most notably this last week, solitude and silence.